From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC podcast. This is episode 489. I am Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on Twitter. Joining me as always, my co-host Derek, DP3 in our forum, and DP3G and DP384 on Twitter. Derek, good to be on here talking basketball gaming with you as always, as we do each and every week. But what's new?
Dwayne Wade or James Harden, Andrew?
Dwayne Wade. I don't have to think about that.
By far, right?
Yeah.
By far, right? Yeah, Jeff Teague doubling down on his James Harden over Dwayne Wade stance, stating that, kids at the park are, they're not trying to play like Dwayne Wade, they're trying to play like James Harden. There's a lot of context missing with that statement. And the kids who are trying to play like James Harden at the park, as you know, I've been playing a lot of pickup recently. But the younger crowd, the kids and young adults that are trying to play like James Harden today, look absolutely ridiculous doing so. And that play style, as I just stated on my Twitter, that play style is not conducive to winning. And it's also often a very selfish style of play, and a play style that also lacks variety and different ways to attack. So, I don't agree with Jeff Teague. Dwayne Wade all the way. Dwayne Wade was also a much better two-way player. And yeah, that's my take on it.
I mean, you look at James Harden, is not an unskilled player by any stretch of the imagination, but it is that style of flash over substance, which is funny because Dwayne Wade was, of course, nicknamed Flash. But you see that kids at the playground dribbling between their legs over and over again and making all these quick fancy moves and fancy dribbling moves, but they're not actually done with purpose. They're not actually creating space. They're not achieving what they're supposed to achieve as far as performing a dribble move, which is to elude the defender, to get them off balance, to get a good shot.
Right, it's dribbling in place for like 10 seconds.
And then launching a bad shot. Yeah.
Yeah, like this is the average person who's trying to play like James Harden at the park. It's dribble, traveling step back, so an off-balance shot and a brick.
Yeah.
And a very low percentage shooting. And oftentimes that traveling step back, or if you even want to call it a legal step back somehow with a gather or whatever, it oftentimes is contested because it's still incredibly hard to actually create space on that step back. And it's also super predictable. These players often have no, tweener game. They have, they're not pulling up in the mid range. If they do drive, they're very limited at what they do at the rim, etc. It's not a winning style of basketball. And it also can really piss your teammates off, right? If you're playing that way and you have other players who know, the right way to play and the ball should be touching more hands, etc., you're also going to piss your teammates off. So the Dwayne Wade style of play was very quick and decisive, almost like the Jordans of the world, right? You catch and go. If you're going to cross over and you're going to do a move, you make a snappy decision to do that, and you catch your defender off guard by doing so. And, he also had a better back to the basket game than Harden. He was a better slasher than Harden, by far, in my opinion. He's a better mid-range player, etc. So, yeah, it's not a good play style to watch, and it's not a conducive style for winning.
It's also a pretty ridiculous way to evaluate players and their standing because, there's probably not a lot of people that are imitating Tim Duncan's style because it's not flashy, but man, was it effective. And his ranking in NBA history has nothing to do with how quote-unquote boring his style was, and I don't think his style was boring. It certainly wasn't as flashy as other players, but he played a very smart game, and it was, if you know basketball, if you appreciate basketball, you appreciate Tim Duncan's style, even though it wasn't flashy. So, yeah, the fact that people aren't imitating a certain style of play doesn't have any bearing on a player's ranking or how great they were.
Right, and if you're playing at the park, and you're playing with a Tim Duncan style player, or if you're playing in a men's league, a local league, semi-pro, pro, etc., when you're playing with your school, like if you're playing in high school or if you're playing in college, etc., when you have a guy like Tim Duncan on your team, you appreciate him. right?
Yeah.
You're like, I want to get this guy the ball in his spots. He's playing winning basketball. He's a team player. He works his butt off on defense, etc. I also never thought Tim Duncan was a very boring player. You can look up some of his highlights as well.
Sure.
I mean, he hung out in
the
the
narrative,
mid-range.
though, right? It was the narrative.
Right, it's the narrative, right? Yeah. But I mean, he had some monster jams. He had some flashy passes. I know a lot of his operations were in the mid-range and little chip shots at the hoop and everything. But Tim Duncan, in my opinion, it was fun to watch a player playing winning basketball, right, and making the right plays. Kevin Garnett, winning basketball. Like Dirk Nowitzki, he's a winning player. Those guys are winning hoopers. But yeah, it's the same reason why Kobe was so fun to watch and his game was so appealing, much like Wade's, is you rarely ever saw Kobe over dribble, right? You rarely saw him stand there in one spot and, for like 6, 7, 8 seconds and just dribble in one place. The highlights of you see him, Froby and whatnot, where he's crossing defenders over and everything. He's usually, catching the ball, leaning one way and going hard the other way and making his move quick and whatnot and catching his defender off guard. Much more appealing game and also more conducive to winning. But yeah, these players recently, the Jeff Teagues, the retired players like Gilbert Arenas, all of that stuff, like Al Harrington, it proves that just because you played professional basketball or you played basketball at a high level doesn't mean that everything you say is gold, right? Like that no fan can be smarter than you in certain areas of the game. Gilbert Arenas came out on a podcast and stated that Dennis Rodman would be looked at as a little guard today.
Yeah.
He was 6'8". Okay. That makes absolutely no sense, and he was in great shape. He said that Anthony Mason was the same size as Russell Westbrook. Like, just because he is a former player, a former pro player, doesn't mean that he's right all the time. And you can correct these players. I don't care what level you played at. I don't care who you are, because right is right.
Well, here's the thing. If being at a certain level is what qualifies you to talk about certain subjects, then a player like Ryan Hollins weighing in on the GOAT debate and Ryan Hollins criticizing Michael Jordan, who Michael Jordan scored more points in his rookie season than Ryan Hollins did in his entire career. Go on Basketball Reference. You'll see that it's absolutely true. So if Ryan Hollins can comment on that, on Michael Jordan, with his standing in the NBA, then I don't see why any other player... I mean, they often rip on Paul Pierce for his commentary, his analysis, and said, he's not good enough to say this. Well, if Paul Pierce isn't good enough, then
you should never listen to a word Stephen A. Smith says.
Or Ryan Hollins or anyone else. Absolutely, yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. The state of basketball discussion today is so toxic and ridiculous, and it's constantly crapping on different eras. It's constant lies. It's constant BS, and that's why I've mostly stayed away from that type of stuff on Twitter.
Derek,
X. So.
We're getting to the point where the 2000s are going to be downplayed to prop up the now, which means we're getting very close to the first half of LeBron James' career being downplayed as a weak era. So that's going to be interesting how they juggle two different narratives like that.
I mean, they're already doing stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
We're seeing it.
It's constant. The contradictions. The contradictions are wild. Most of the points and comparisons that are made make absolutely no sense. And shout out to Kid Cash, who's been tagging us in tweets and stories related to these ridiculous, toxic basketball takes and conversations. I have a lot of trouble listening to any of the talking heads today.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's Stephen A. Smith. I don't care if it's Skip and Shannon. I don't care. And they've recently separated. Oh, how heartbreaking. I don't care if it's, Max Kellerman. I don't care who it is. Doris Burke is often a nightmare to listen to because she's incredibly biased, and some of her comparisons, both on NBA 2K and during the broadcast, are absolutely absurd. Some of her takes overall. I have trouble listening to most all of the talking heads and most of the commentators. So, yeah, I just try to focus on the eras that I love, the players that I love, and look at things like realistically.
Agreed. And as for Jeff Teague, his take was as bland as his generic face in NBA Live 10, which was There's a lot of great faces in NBA Live 10. We went through them together over Parsec, commenting on them, but and just to each other, actually. That wasn't even for content. That was just you and I hanging out, basically, online over Parsec, looking at some faces in NBA Live 10. But, Jeff Teague, for whatever reason, was one of the top picks that year, or in the lottery that year, and didn't have a proper face. But, that's as bland as his take.
Yeah, and those generic faces on the games that actually have good faces, games like NBA Live 2000, NBA Live 2010 has a bunch of good faces, like Ron Artest, like we pointed out, Meta World Peace and whatnot. When those games do have a bunch of good faces, the ones that are not like likeness accurate, that are very generic, like you mentioned, they really stand out.
Yeah.
You play a game like NBA Live 15, and you can really tell when a player has not been scanned, when they don't have a real cyber face. And when they zoom in on that player, it sticks out like a sore thumb. And it's like, I would never, ever in my entire lifetime be able to guess that was supposed to be this player.
I mean, you talk about NBA Live faces, and Live 14, for example, was a letdown compared to 2K14 on PS4 X1 with the detail of some of the faces, although some of them do look pretty good for the time. But I've been playing Live 18 recently, just uploaded a video today when we're recording this of a game I played with Patrick Ewing for his birthday, 61 years old. Happy birthday, Patrick Ewing, the Hoya Destroyer, of course. Uploaded a reel of him and some of his former teammates from across his career in NBA Live 18, and there are some amazing faces in Live 18.
I am super impressed with some of the cyber faces for the Legends.
Yeah.
In that game, I mentioned that on a previous show. World Be Free looks exactly like his real life counterpart, right? Larry Nance looks amazing.
And those aren't scans. Those aren't scans.
Spot on. And they even got, and they're not scans. And they even got Drazen Petrovic, his accessories right, like his wristband and everything. Super impressive how hard they worked on getting those Legends right. And I was also impressed with Live 18 with some of the signature style. When you're using Julius Erving, he does different dunks, right, than the other Legends. He has like a flying one-handed dunk where it looks exactly like the Doctor doing it. And they really paid attention to detail with the players that were good at throwing it down in real life. Back in the day, like the Larry Nances of the world, who had one of the best dunk contests I have ever seen. Spud Webb, his ability to throw it down in that game. A lot of good in NBA Live 18 Ultimate Team. And I wish I had spent a little bit more time on it back in the day. However, I do want to point something out. My brother and I are on game number 80 of our NBA 2K23 Series X, my NBA, where we're using Legends versus regular teams. Our fun season where we're producing highlights, where we have stat goals, all of that stuff. And we were talking about it last night because we're winding this season down and we're trying to get it done before, NBA 2K24 is released. And we really did get our money's worth with NBA 2K22 and NBA 2K23. Why? Because when you only pay basically the base price of the game and you sink hundreds of hours into the game, I don't care what mode you're playing, and you have a good time, for the majority of that, those hundreds of hours, then you got your money's worth, right? And we're playing 12-minute quarters, and we're playing every game on the same team and everything. And we've put well over 100 hours into NBA 2K23. And we've produced some great highlights, some which have been shown in the top 10. We're using some of our favorite players of all time and some of the most dominant players in NBA history. We've achieved most of our stat goals for that season. And, you may not have gotten your money's worth with 2K23 because you haven't had the same amount of activity as I have. But I will say here on the air that while I have a lot of critiques of 2K23, I did get my money's worth.
Well, that's the thing, that we do have our criticisms of the game, but we have still spent time with it. We've still had some fun with it, made good memories with it. So, which is, at the end of the day, what we want to do with any video games. That's why we play them, to have fun. Certainly there are people who play them to be competitive online and to achieve success there. But again, it is coming down to enjoying the experience on the virtual hardwood or blacktop, as the case may be. So, yeah, I do think I did get my money's worth. I have enjoyed my time with 2K23. Obviously, I get the game every year anyway because I'm a collector and we are content creators and collectors, so it's going to happen anyway. I do not regret the purchase because it is something that I budget for, something that I intend to do. But yeah, it's great to hear that you've got your money's worth because, again, that's what you want, especially if you do get the special editions.
Yeah, and I think that being able to fit in all of my retro gaming during NBA 2K23's cycle, I think also was incredibly helpful, right? Like we weren't spending all of our time on NBA 2K23. We were able to find our niche with it, which was that Legends season. We were able to find fun in one of the modes at least, which I think is sometimes the company's goal as well is, something's going to hit that consumer, right?
Yeah.
Like they're going to be able to have fun with
that's 2K's strength, is that it does have that variety of modes and
Exactly.
deep content, all the historical content, obviously, and what they've done with My NBA eras, even before that, just having My NBA, that deep franchise experience, a deep card collecting mode, team building mode with my team, and then my career and the connected experiences, for all the problems with those, there is something for everyone.
Exactly. And, it's allowed us to have seasons on so many retro games as well, similar seasons co-op, like on 2K19, NBA Live 2004, NBA Live 2003, Live 2000, Inside Drive 2003. Boy, the list goes on. NBA Live 06. We just have so many seasons going right now that are a lot of fun. So yeah, no, it absolutely worked out. But talking about retro gaming, Andrew, DuckStation, you need to download it. It's the new PlayStation 1 emulator because we had been using obviously EPSXE, and it's a little limited when it comes to, setting your resolution. There's sometimes issues with frame rates on it. Sometimes it's really hard to get the games in full screen, etc. But on DuckStation, they have just done an amazing job making basically every game I've tried on PS1. You can make it, full screen. The game pads work great. The frame rates are smooth. There's a ton of options related to, resolutions, etc. And, for the basketball gaming community, please check it out. Check out that PS1 emulator DuckStation because it is flat out awesome.
That's the one you used for the latest clip you shared, wasn't it, from NBA Shootout?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. You mean LeBron and Carmelo Anthony, the rookies in NBA Shootout 2004?
Faces are a bit blocky,
faces,
but
the faces are. You can tell that they're real cyber faces. Like you can tell it's Carmelo Anthony's face and LeBron James' face, but they're slapped on a very poor human model.
Yeah.
And their hair looks ridiculous. Almost looks like it's just like marker drawn on. Doesn't look like their real life hair at all. But that's some of the stuff we dealt with.
Absolutely.
Back in the day. As Dazar stated, he quote tweeted that image and said, I thought this was elite back in the day.
Yeah.
We did
yeah.
think that those graphics
it can't get any better than this.
They were peak for its time.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've talked about it before, NBA Fast Break 98. When I first saw that, I was like, I feel like I'm watching a real game. Like this looks like real life. This can't get any better. That looks just like this player. This looks just like that player. And, I don't feel bad about that. And, I go back and I play those games all the time and I can appreciate what they were doing at that time. And I still like looking at those games.
It's important to put the games in perspective and say this is the height of technology at the time. Technology got better and facilitated better graphics. That's when people say, "Oh, I can't believe I thought this looked good," because it did at the time. You can't see the future like that, obviously. But no, I love going back to those games, obviously. And yeah, keen to check out DuckStation because on top of simply going back and playing these games, obviously I'm writing articles and so forth and doing videos as well, doing more videos these days. So getting the higher resolution, those games in higher resolution is important for that because some of my screenshots from Live 2001, 2002, PS1 for some of my articles about players who had phantom stints, they're not the best resolution from EPSXE. So yeah, looking forward to a better emulated experience.
Yeah, and DuckStation is incredibly lightweight, as was EPSXE. If you want to use Action to record your highlights, or do like a full recording of the entire game that you play, or if you want to use the recorder that comes with your graphics card, whether it be NVIDIA or AMD, it's super easy to record off of that emulator, and the quality is outstanding. For other emulators that I recommend, for Sega Dreamcast, I recommend Demule. I've uploaded NBA 2K footage from that NBA 2K, NBA 2K1, NBA 2K2, etc. And that footage looks absolutely awesome. There's no audio issues on my end with that emulator, and it runs incredibly smooth. And for PlayStation 2, PCSX2, I've been using that for a long time. Works great in full screen, has all the different resolution options, easy to record on, etc. PS3, RPCS3, you and I use that all the time to connect and play, whether it be NBA Jam or NBA Live 10, NBA Live 09. We've connected and played Live 08 on that, etc. I've run 2 tournaments using that emulator, one on College Hoops 2K8 and one on NCAA Basketball 10, which someday will finish. That tournament will be finished someday. And for GameCube, Dolphin is the easy winner. It runs great, works great. I use that all the time for games like NBA Street Volume 2 and whatnot. And then Project 64 for the N64 emulator. I was just playing GoldenEye 007 recently on that. For the OG Xbox, I use XEMU. And my brother and I have our NBA Inside Drive 2003 season on that, and that emulator is amazing. I played Live 2002 with Nate Stasio on using that emulator as well. And Nate Stasio, obviously, Live 01 legend. And then for Xbox 360, Xenia, so Xenia. It's has audio issues. Some games work for it, some games don't, but it's the best we have right now for Xbox 360.
No, there's a lot of great resources out there, and of course, as far as PC gaming is concerned, DG Voodoo and other N-Glide wrappers that simulate old video cards. Yeah, there's a lot we can do to play these old favorites, and we always want to remove the stigma of retro gaming, because sometimes it's still there, Derek. Sometimes people say, oh, why are you still playing that? Why aren't you playing the latest game? Well, we do play the latest game every year, but we also like to go back to old favorites and see what other games do or don't hold up. That's why I do Way Back Wednesday every week, to dive into basketball gaming history, because there are decades of basketball gaming history at this time, and plenty of other genres, people go back and continue to play old favorites, or they go back and look at them and evaluate them and see what was great about them, see what was not so great about them. So, yeah, I want to remove that stigma from retro basketball gaming.
Retro gaming is an easy hobby to get into, and it's rather inexpensive if you know where to look. And what it does is it opens up a world of opportunity for you to have a bunch of different experiences. So you're not just playing the same game with the same gameplay year in and year out. It allows you to experience different gameplay direction from different companies. It allows you to utilize modes that are not even in the newer games, like All-Star Weekend, etc. Example like NBA Live 2005. It allows you to, just get an overall different gameplay experience, which is just huge. And I think that variety keeps you and I constantly playing basketball video games.
It's a palate cleanser, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you're on social media as well, now you have a whole, bevy of footage you can share, and it's not always of the most recent game. You can share, and some of those retro gaming channels on YouTube and some of those retro gaming accounts on Instagram, on Twitter, etc. A lot of those do very well, right? Because people oftentimes today love to look back on that footage and see what those games are all about and see how those games are being played, etc. And hear commentary on those games. I know Kid Cash loves listening to the commentary on the older games. So, retro gaming opens up a whole world of new opportunity.
And of course, it doesn't have to be expensive, as you said. I mean, if you're going up for some of the rarer titles, then maybe it will start to increase in price, some of those rarer and more difficult to find titles. But a lot of the basics, the annual releases of NBA Live, NBA 2K, etc., are very affordable, as we've said before. And obviously, I think a big part of the nostalgia for those games is, on top of the basketball experience within, is simply not having to spend extra money on them to get the premium experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, here's the deal. You can go out to like a GameStop, right? And you can find NBA 2K14 if they still have it on the shelves for like Xbox One or PS4. You can buy that game for like $3, Andrew. That's how much I paid for the game when I picked it up again recently. I got it for like $3 or something like that. It was like $2 or $3. And you get that game home and you're like, this game looks great. This game plays great. The gameplay is fun. Wait a minute, I can play my career on this game. It has a full season. I can jump in and play a season. All of that stuff. Oh, it has classic teams. All of that. Like, you just got all of that entire experience for a few bucks. And even if you had to spend $10 for that experience or $15, maybe you had to order the game off of Amazon or maybe you had to get it off of eBay. It's still, you could sink hundreds of hours like you have, Andrew, with your My Career. You're on season 6. You can spend hundreds of hours of having a new, fresh, fun experience on that game that you're not getting from the newest title. And you don't have to spend any extra money to do it, right? That's amazing. So that's the way I look. That's why retro gaming is so fun. Just like you said, it's a one-time cost. You end up having the game, and all those modes are at your disposal. You know, roster editing is in a lot of these games. All of that. You have a season mode in pretty much every single one of them. You have stat tracking. You can make great highlights. You can, all that stuff. Like, the opportunities are endless.
Oh, for sure. And by the way, highlights from games 11 to 20 in Year 6 of NBA 2K14 My Career will be going up on the NLSC YouTube channel shortly, if indeed they're not up there by the time this podcast drops on Tuesday. But yeah, just the amount of fun we've had, the palate cleansing aspect of retro gaming, and they are fun to just put on, and you can, as you say, you can play a career, you can play a season, a franchise game. If it's still scratching that itch to play virtual basketball, then by all means, play an old game. If you prefer a newer game, obviously play that. Play what you want. Don't be beholden to following trends as far as trying to find enjoyment on the virtual hardwood. Play what you actually enjoy. Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community. But speaking of the cost of gaming, that's something that's come up because there's a kind of a concerning rumor at the moment, Derek, and it is a rumor at the moment about a battle pass or a season pass for NBA 2K24. It's been floated by a blue check on Twitter, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it has been put out there, a rumor that there's going to be a season pass, that seasonal content is going to actually have a subscription cost this year in NBA 2K24. And that's obviously bad news. I mean, back in the day, we had the Dynamic DNA updates in NBA Live that were subscription-based. They came with all new copies of the game came with that subscription to Dynamic DNA, but if you bought the game secondhand and it already had the code redeemed, you had to pay for it and pay for those DNA and roster updates, which quickly went away. That wasn't a good idea. Although, who knows these days? People might actually support that because battle passes and season passes have become very normalized. But I would hope, Derek, that the community will push back on this if indeed that rumor is true, because we don't need that extra cost for basketball gaming.
Yeah, and like you stated, it's just a rumor. We don't know if this is true or not. Apparently, according to the tweet, that a few people who got early looks at NBA 2K24 had stated that there possibly would be a subscription model related to, like you stated, the season pass. But that got me thinking about, what do we think these games should cost today? The NBA 2K23s of the world, the NBA 2K24s, which is coming up, NBA 2K25, when they start, previewing that. What should these games cost? So I asked the community, what do you think NBA 2K24 should cost? And I wanted them to keep in mind two things. One, the base game, so what they think the base game should cost. And two, microtransactions, if they should be in the game, in your opinion. And I also said, keep your online player in mind. Should your online player be ready to go out of the gate without extra VC? So before we get to the community's responses, Andrew, what do you think NBA 2K24 should cost?
Well, of course, my answer is going to vary from yours based on the fact that I'm in Australia, obviously, and the value of our dollar means that if you work out the exchange rate, it's actually about the same price. So for me, between 75 and 100 Australian dollars, which works out to be about 60 US dollars, I still think is a fair price. I mean, if they want to say $70 because they haven't put the price up for 25 years or whatever, I can see that. My philosophy, and it makes me an old head, a grumpy elder millennial, Derek, is that if you pay for a game a full price AAA release, then you should get all of the content of that game, and you should be able to make progress and unlock content simply by playing the game. It's an antiquated idea, I know, but that is my philosophy about gaming prices. Now, if you have to have microtransactions, and obviously it's very unlikely that they're going to go anywhere unless there's actually legislation against them, as some countries in Europe have already done, obviously. But, bring that price down. There should not be a pack of VC that costs twice as much as the standard edition of the game. And at the moment, the most expensive pack, 450,000 VC in Australian dollars, costs $150 for that pack, which is, again, twice as much as the regular price of the game.
Ridiculous.
Get it from JB Hi-Fi, from about $70 or $80. So to pay twice as much, again, for the game, and that will max you out, more or less, that 450,000 VC. So to max out a player also shows how much grinding you have to do to max out a player in my career these days. But having to pay basically three times the amount of what the game costs to get the game and then to quickly upgrade a player, that just shouldn't be a thing.
We have content creators who have openly said on YouTube that they've spent thousands of dollars on NBA 2K23. And why? Because they're creating content for the game, right? And they want to display certain players. And they also want to look good for the screen and whatnot, and to, get more followers, get more subscribers and whatnot. And I know that a lot of people do that in the Madden community, where they're spending boatloads of money on Ultimate Team. And I think it's a damn shame. And I feel bad that people feel like they have to do this as well. And a lot of them are facing a lot of pressure to do so. My stance on it is, I think that microtransactions shouldn't exist, period. That's my stance.
Yeah.
I think that the base game should be around 60 or 70, $60 or $70. But with that, you get a full game. You don't get the gambling mechanics. There's no pressure. There's not, you're able to use your player and him be effective and enjoyable out of the gate if you're playing online. If, you're playing my team, the players should be attainable without a absolutely ridiculous grind. The players that you want, being able to upgrade your lineup and whatnot. And I just think that microtransactions overall are super predatory. It allows these companies to be super predatory. And unfortunately with 2K, as I've stated, and I've shared articles about this before, which prove it, they make more money off of microtransactions than they do off of the base game sales. And that's damn disappointing. And the Live King made a great point. He goes, if you're going to flood your game with microtransactions, then the game should be free to play. Like, it should be a free to play game if you're going to reach into people's pockets like that after they've already obtained the game. Now, I hate the free to play model. I hate the idea of it, but he's not wrong, right? If you're going to force somebody to spend 60 to 70, 80, sometimes more dollars, after they've already received the game, then they shouldn't have to pay for the damn game, right? So that's my take on it. So I agree with his stance to a point there as well. But yeah, my opinion on this is base game price like we've always had, $60 to $70, whatever, but no microtransactions. I don't think they should exist.
I mean, it has brought a freemium economy, a freemium model, free-to-play model to a AAA game that you are buying every single year for full price. I mean, obviously some people wait and get it on sale, but they are getting a lot of pre-orders, obviously, and people getting the expensive editions because of the extra content, the extra VC, the extra MT, the cards, the card packs that trickle out throughout the season to boost your collection. Of course, you get a lot of doubles, ridiculously, with those pre-order packs anyway, so the value isn't fantastic. But no, they are making bank off of microtransactions, obviously. And I understand the argument for going free-to-play, Derek, but I think if it was truly free-to-play, if you think microtransactions and grinding and pushy recurrent revenue mechanics are bad now, in free-to-play, it's going to be even worse. And who knows?
Oh, yeah.
And who knows?
How many games out there, Andrew, how many games out there are pay to win?
Yeah.
And you see it. You see people in the comments on these games on Steam and whatnot, because that's what I look at the most usually, is because I play on PC the most. So I see these games on Steam that are advertised and promoted and everything. And these ones that are free, you go in and look at those Steam reviews and they're people just pissed off. Andrew.
Yeah.
And they're like, this game is P2W, so pay to win, or this game is pay to win. You can't get any of the armor.
The Donatello brought up,
you can't get any of the good armor without paying for it. You can't get any of the good weapons. You can't access any of the areas. All of that stuff. Even games like Elder Scrolls Online. I want to bring this up. So Elder Scrolls Online has a base price for the game. I want to say that it's like $50 or $60. But if you want to access more areas of the game, like, you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
And there's DLC, there's constant push for you to buy, whatever it is, coins or whatever, to be able to, access these new areas and everything. That game was already $60, Andrew. And they're locking all of these different areas in the game behind a paywall, right? So yeah, a lot of people think that these games are, pay to win, and they're right, or pay to access. That's another good way to put it. Pay to access, and then pay to enjoy. And it's terrible for gaming. It's been horrible for the gaming scene in RPGs, MMORPGs, adventure games, simulators, basketball managers, like stuff like that, which we've talked about on a prior show. Yeah, I think free to play would just open up an avenue of locking more stuff, more access, more enjoyable content behind paywalls. And then people would find out that they're spending more than they were even spending before. So I agree, free to play, not the way to go.
And people often make the comparison with microtransactions to old school arcade games. Actually going to an arcade, as you and I did growing up, and putting a coin in the machine and getting a turn. And yes, you could certainly put a lot of money through those machines back in the day, but you also got what you paid for. I mean, yes, they were also made to, so you have to keep feeding the machine through difficulty and so forth, but you paid for a turn, you got a turn. And if you got good at those games, good, there it is again. If you got good at those games, you could make a quarter, or in my case, $1. I think it was 50 cents or $1 back in the day. You could make that last a while with a lot of games. So you would get your money's worth, and you were getting what you paid for. These days, with the loot box mechanics, you are not necessarily getting what you paid for. Now, I go back to Live 18 Ultimate Team. As I say, I've been playing that. I actually did spend a bit of money on that back in the day, because with their Legends packs, with the Legends packs drops every week, they had guaranteed Legends in those packs. That you paid for those packs, you would get Legends. You could pay with real money. You could buy the NBA points, which are basically the premium currency similar to VC, or you could buy it using the in-game currency, the coins, which were kind of like MT, which you can't buy in the game anyway. And I did spend a little bit of money to get my Scottie Pippen and a couple of other Legends. Normally I just did the challenges and opened the packs the normal way, but I did pay a little bit because I was getting a guaranteed result. Do I necessarily support that? No. I'm going against my principles there and engaging in some microtransactions to do that. But the only reason I did that was because I knew I was getting what I was paying for. I am not going to pay for the 0.5% of a chance to get a Pippen or a Jordan in my team, for example, in 2K. So if there's some guaranteed content, if there's DLC, I got the DLC for Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas back in the day because I liked the idea of that expansion pack and loved the experience of that. So I was happy to pay for that and get basically 2.5 games worth of content for about 1.5 times the price of a game, I guess. So if it's done fairly, I will at least consider it. I did pay to upgrade my MyPlayer a couple of times back in the day. I haven't done it since 2K18. A lot of things changed after 2K18, obviously. Didn't mind it so much for 2K17. We had a blast playing online, so getting that boost at the start, I don't know, maybe $20 worth of VC or so to get a bit of a head start on that. Again, I don't condone that. I don't necessarily support it. I did bite the bullet and did it at the time. But yeah, generally speaking, I'm not in favor of microtransactions. I have engaged in them before, but not again.
Reminder that loot boxes are banned in many countries.
Yeah.
I just want to throw that out there.
I think. Yeah.
And I want our listeners to ask themselves why. Why would an entire country ban loot boxes? They're super predatory, and we've talked about it so many times. But what did the community have to say, Andrew?
So the Live King, Steve, says the standard price plus Battle Pass price for seasonal content and clothes online, that's pretty much the standard. Paying money for online attributes has always been a bad practice. I've never been fully against microtransactions, but paying to win is just wrong. And goes on to say, the game should be free to play with what they're doing. The problem is, they have the offline portion of the game they have to charge for. If 2K didn't have the NBA and was just Park, they wouldn't have to charge a yearly price. Same with Live if they went that route.
So yeah, the NBA is still the draw. And I've said that on many shows. You take the NBA out of NBA Live and you just make it an exclusive online game and whatnot. It's not going to have the same draw. It's not going to sell the same. They're not going to be able to promote it the same, all of that. And I think it loses its value. I think that, these kids today often want to put on these NBA games in order, these basketball video games in order to use NBA players and be able to, jump into play now with the NBA players or be able to go online with those players, to be able to go against them, etc. Because at the end of the day, most of the time, these gamers are fans of the NBA. So I don't think that model would work. So you might be in the same boat with that as I am. But like I said before, I don't like the idea of free to play. And I'll say again, I just think microtransactions don't belong in video games.
Agreed. Joven89 says, I'd separate them as base game at $20 to $30 and online modes also $30, although online modes should be free because without microtransactions, you can't compete. And I certainly agree about microtransactions and how they've impacted the online scene, because people say, oh, you don't have to pay. Remember, it's optional, Derek. But of course, people that do pay will set the competitive balance because they have upgraded quicker, so you have to keep up with the Joneses. You have to either pay or grind hard to match them and be able to have an avatar that is viable to compete with online. Separating the game, like having a base game and the online game, it's an interesting idea, and I have actually drafted an article about the possibility of having two different 2K games. But I think they wouldn't want to give up on the sales. They wouldn't want to give up on as much recurrent revenue as they make through microtransactions. Also getting those guaranteed sales every year, those 10 million sales or whatever of the game, and not having it free to play. They don't want to give up all of that revenue, both game sales and VC sales. And I think that might be confusing for games. I mean, I like the idea; it's interesting, but I don't think it'd be viable.
Well, two things. One, very creative idea.
Yeah.
Two, the question isn't, what would 2K do? Because there's no way they're going to get rid of this microtransaction model as long as they can get away with it. And there's no way they're going to, reduce the amount of money they're making outside of the base game sales, right? So this isn't what, will 2K do it? This is what you believe, as a community, the game should cost.
Sure.
So he believes that the base game should be $30, basically, roughly around there. And that if he wants to go online and he wants to enjoy the online components of the game, he could pay a one-time fee of $30. Now,
a season
in
pass,
theory,
yeah,
like a season pass. In theory, you know what? That's not a bad idea.
True.
That is not a terrible idea, because that means I'd only have to pay like $30 for the game every year, Andrew, because I don't care about playing online.
Yeah.
Right. So that would be great for me. So great suggestion. But no, I mean, like I said, you're creative, but like Andrew said, 2K would never do something like that.
Sticky Fingers says, on PC and old gen, without any improvement than roster update and menus minor changes, $35 or euros max. And as for VC, $0 or €0. And again, that works out to be a similar price point to what I'd say in Australian dollars. I think around about 55, 60 Australian dollars, which again, for the prior gen version and PC being a prior gen port, I agree.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then also with all the issues with the retro content, right? Which they advertise as, complete content for the game, but it's not, with all the different inaccuracies and rush jobs and all of that stuff. I know Sticky loves his, retro content. So he's underwhelmed in that area. And, I don't think that the PC version or the, other old gen versions should be full price still. So I definitely agree with him there. And hey, guess what? Back in the day, a game like NFL 2K5 was $19.99, Andrew.
That's
$20.
Right, yeah.
And look how well that game did and how well that sold. I know it's somewhat apples and oranges because we're talking about different eras now, but hey, that worked out for 2K back then.
And jumping over to the NLC Discord, Avery says, quite simply, shouldn't be over $60 US for the base game.
There you go. So he's in line with me, right? So like $60-$70 base game. And then I believe his idea on this is that no microtransactions. You pay for the base game and you get all the content and your player is ready to go if you're going to play online, right from the start. At least he's enjoyable, right? Like you have to grind a little bit to upgrade him and everything. But, from the get-go, he's usable on the court in a competitive atmosphere.
I mean, once again, we've seen what the impact of microtransactions has done to the experience. Basing it around recurrent revenue has made the design of My Team greedier, My Career even greedier still. That's the funny thing, is that My Team, for as much of a moneymaker as it is, I still find that easier to play, no money spent, than My Career, because your My Player is so underpowered at the start. At least, even if you're just playing the NBA side of My Career, you're just you don't even belong in the NBA with ratings like that. Your physical attributes, if nothing else, they can at least make your physical attributes like a player that isn't not just 60 overall, but 60 years old, quite frankly, with the speed and the jumping and everything. You're supposed to be this highly touted prospect and a young rookie in their physical prime, and yet you have to grind up those attributes as well as your skills. So, yeah, the way they've made it is less fun, as we said before, less fun in order to generate more recurrent revenue, and it's a weaker experience as a result.
Right. Intentional grind in order to line their pockets.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the truth. I know that sounds harsh, but in reality, that's the only way you can look at it.
But yeah, it's a situation with microtransactions that unfortunately is probably not going to get any better. They have become very normalized, but as long as we do have those offline modes, those single-player modes, or local multiplayer modes, as the case may be, obviously, Derek. When it comes to franchise modes, I always think of them as solo play. You play them co-op with your brothers. But as long as we have those My NBA eras and things that we can play without having to spend and be forced into spend, then so much the better. And once again, retro gaming as well. It scratches that itch. And if you want to avoid microtransactions, retro game.
The first thing my brother and I are going to do when we get NBA 2K24, and this is both on the PC version and on Series X, is we are going to put our Legends team together, and we're going to jump into my NBA, and we're going to test out the gameplay. And if we enjoy the game as much as we did NBA 2K23 and NBA 2K22, and it's fun for that type of gameplay, loose, fun, action, highlights, stat goals, etc., we are going to get our money's worth with that game, because we're going to play a full 82-game season, 12-minute quarters, and I'll be able to show off a bunch of highlights, all of that. So for me, that offline content at the base game price, that's enough for us. That doesn't mean that I don't think that the microtransaction push is predatory, that I don't see what's happening in the online modes related to developing your player. And it doesn't mean I don't see what's going on with Ultimate Team, with packs and all of that and the cost of that. Like, I care about the fellow gamer, Andrew.
Exactly.
As do you.
Yeah.
We're very passionate about that. So I want gamers to be treated fairly, no matter what mode they're playing. And that's why I asked that community question. How much do you think the game should cost? Because the consumers should have a say in all this. in my opinion. You know, they should have a voice in this. And as you can tell from the responses and from what we've seen on social media in general, a lot of gamers feel like they're being taken advantage of.
Definitely, and we want value for money. And people say, oh, it's a business, oh, it's a product. Yes, it's a business and a product. That means we can evaluate the business practices. It means we can evaluate the product for value for money. So, of course, we're going to complain about that. Of course, we're going to bring up concerns about that. So, yeah, it's one of those things that I don't know why people shill for companies, these multi-billion-dollar companies, Derek. I don't know why they shill for them instead of standing with their fellow gamer.
And it's people of all ages, too, the shilling. It's not just kids.
Oh, no.
It's not just teens. It's adults. It's people in their 30s. It's people in their 40s.
People who should know better, quite frankly.
That do that. And it's because they're not thinking big picture. They're not, and that's one of my favorite things, big picture. They're
Absolutely.
not thinking about the big picture. But, we talked about it before. One of the strengths of the 2K series is they give you all of these different modes and all of this different content and all the different customization. And, I can go into my NBA with my brother and I can create the court like I do every year for our team. I can create the jerseys. I can, choose a community logo, something somebody else uploaded, or I can upload, to the 2K share and use a logo that I upload. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a Seattle Supersonics logo or a Legends logo. It doesn't matter. And I have the ability to make the team the way I want and us to take the floor in our cool new uniforms and our court and all of that stuff. And we have access to the legends in offline. We don't have to pay for them. And we can edit those players. We can change their dunk packages. We can change their signature shots. We can do all of this customization related to the players. That's why NBA 2K, we still play the newer ones, Andrew.
For sure.
Because it has something for us. And that is something that we can applaud the company on, is they do load their games with content.
And to that point, if Live comes back, when NBA Live comes back, and we've talked about how we want that to happen, yes, it needs the gameplay to be spot on, or it needs to have enjoyable gameplay. It needs to have the depth of modes and content. But the other thing that NBA Live can do that's going to help them compete with 2K is having value for money and not having that aggressive push for microtransactions. I know that's asking a lot of EA, and I know they didn't really do it on the last generation because they were trying to foster that goodwill, because they didn't have a game that they could really push the microtransactions in. But if they can convince the suits to not be pushy about that stuff, that's how you get some goodwill back. That's how you start making a dent in 2K sales. So something to keep in mind if Live is to come back.
Two things, EA Sports. Make your new NBA Live deep and make it fair.
Yes.
Those are the two big ones.
So we will see what happens. The preview season for NBA 2K24 is right around the corner. In a week's time, it will be really getting underway with the previews, developer blogs, gameplay footage, trailers, whatever. We will, of course, be aggregating the news on the NLSC, discussing it in our forum, on our Discord, and here on the podcast. So please stay tuned for that. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, also known as X, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
I am Andrew in the forum, and Andrew NLSC on Twitter, or X. The NLSC is on Twitter, or X, and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.